let's look at this. Dick Cheney's new hobby seems to be crawling out from out of the shadows on a routine Here he was the other day attacking President Obama's decision and making about the president's leadership. Cheney said that, quote, the President Obama, is trying to pretend we're not at war. Here's John Brennan, however, yesterday, President Obama's top counterterrorism advisor, reacting to Cheney Sunday. By the way, John Brennan also worked with Cheney. Let's listen.
I'm very disappointed in the Vice President's comments. I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I've worked for the past 5 administrations, and either the Vice President is willfully mischaracterizing this President's position, both in terms of the language he uses and the actions he's taken, or he's ignorant of the facts. And in either case, it doesn't speak well of what the Vice President is doing. I would not have come back into this government if I felt that this President was not committed to prosecuting this war against al-Qaeda. And every day I see it in the President's face, I see it in the actions he's taken, and so I'm confident that this country is in fact protected by this President's position on al-Qaeda and against terrorist activities. We're going to continue to do this. We're going to do it hard. We're going to do it constantly.
Well, I can't think of a better blocking back than this guy. He came out strong, Gene, and I think he's made a very good bipartisan, nonpartisan case against Cheney's yapping.
Well, he did, and I just thought Cheney's statement to Politico last week was way off the reservation, included criticism of President Obama for handling the case of the attempted underwear bomber in federal court exactly the same way that Cheney and Bush handled the case of the shoe bomber in federal court. He's now in a federal prison. So the criticism itself just didn't make any sense, except as just kind of an ad hominem crazy attack. You know,
Michael, the same point can be made that the President Bush at the time took 6 days to respond to that shoe bomber, and nobody was keeping a clock on him. This time, Cheney came out 6 days later, but 2 days after the President had already spoken, attacking him for not having spoken sooner, when he spoke 2 days before Cheney did, which was about the time, well, Cheney was keeping time with the way Bush used to do it, at 6 days late. How come they keep coming up with different scorecards, Cheney, for Republicans and Democrats? By their own scorecard, they get zeros.
Your reference of President Bush's name. Your reference of President Bush's name, I think, makes a significant point. Look at the dichotomy between Bush's silence and Cheney's constant carping against this administration. Chris, I reached out for H.W. Brands, the presidential historian, because I wanted to know who is more in line with their predecessors. And clearly, the answer is George W. Bush by his silence, the exception being if a vice president holds a desire to run for the highest office. I don't get that from Dick Cheney. So here's the question I ask. What is his motivation? Is his motivation to right the ship as he sees it? I don't think so. Or is it just to tear down the commander-in-chief? And my big objection is not so much the substance as it is the timing. I mean, how about the fact that here was President Obama, after he was reviewing the situation for Afghanistan, according to Dick Cheney, that was dithering. But when he's finally ready to go to West Point and make known a war plan, the vice president gives 90 minutes to Politico to cut out his knees from under him. I thought that was appalling. I thought that was offensive. And if the roles had been reversed, you can imagine the hue and cry from the
use these technical arguments, whether we go to a military court or we go to a civilian court, to make their larger point, which is that the President of the United States doesn't care about defending us, who doesn't believe we're under threat from al-Qaeda. And they say he never says the word terror. Well, here he is at his inauguration, beginning his administration. Let's listen to President Obama about a year ago.
We will not apologize for our way of life, nor will we waver in its defense. And for those who seek to advance their aims by inducing terror and slaughtering innocents, we say to you now that our spirit is stronger and cannot be broken. You cannot outlast us, and we will defeat you.
Well, Michael, that's a pretty good cri de guerre.
Listen, not only was that offering, I think, right on point, but so too was the president's inaugural radio address for 2010. And he said all the right things, at least in my view, on Saturday in the radio address. And Chris, how about the speech that he offered at West Point when there was deafening silence from the right? And please don't think that I'm buying into all ways in which the Obama administration is fighting what I still regard as a war against terrorists. But I think that this criticism is not only unfounded, but ill-timed. And my bigger criticism is that it's ill-timed and it seeks to undercut
the big story over the holidays. This guy gets on a United States-bound plane for Detroit, right? He's got explosives in his underwear. Now we're in the pat-down culture. How far can we feel somebody up in an airport? Dick Cheney couldn't be happier about all of this for some reason. The statements he's put out since that terrifying incident that can't be described as anything other than gloating. That's where Cheney is. Cheney claims his criticism comes from reading the national security briefs and knowing just how many threats there are out there against the United States. The president spoke extensively about terrorism in his Nobel speech, his speech at West Point, and a mosque in Turkey over the summer. He also used the term this weekend, Senator.
All those involved in the attempted act of terrorism on Christmas must know you too will be held to account. Our nation is at war against a far-reaching network of violence and hatred, and that we will do whatever it takes to defeat them and defend our country.
The system failed. We all know that. But it was caught by some people in place, right? Now, what we need to find out is where can we fix this? So no matter where Obama starts, the righties aren't going to like it. So we got to live with that. I say the Democrats have got to go on the offensive and not become the punching bag in all of this. Get your cell phones out, folks. Want to know what you think about this narrative that is starting to develop in 2010. Tonight's text survey is: do you think the White House should fight back harder against Dick Cheney's Congressman Alan Grayson? He's on the Tell It Like It Is team in the Ed division. Congressman, great to have you with us tonight. You know,
Thanks. I'm so happy to be your first guest of the year.
There's a reason for that, my friend, and it's great to have you with us. All right, I get this feeling that the Republicans have been waiting for this conversation for a long time because, in a sense, their political security is security. What has to happen in 2010 to make sure that the Democrats and the liberals of this country really communicate their message, Congressman? What do you think has to happen?
They failed us when they were in charge. Here's an interesting document. This is from 5 weeks before September 11th. I think that Mr. Cheney's familiar with it. FBI information indicates patterns of suspicious activity in this country consistent with preparations for hijackings or other types of attacks, including recent surveillance of federal buildings in New York. This is a document that the President and Vice President Cheney got 5 weeks before September 11th, and the President went on vacation in August.
Well,
so what does that tell you? Whose issue is this security issue? Is this a Republican issue or what?
No, exactly. And it's not right, it's not left, it's center, but the Republicans have taken it upon themselves to politicize anything. I think they've been waiting for this moment. Something
they
happened.
Failed us. The greatest attack of terrorism in American history happened on their watch. We have nothing to be defensive about.
So is there going to be some conversation behind closed doors amongst Democrats? And I think supporters want to hear this, that you're not taking this anymore, that this has to...
No, I mean, look, certainly not from Cheney. My goodness, when Ross Perot was talking about that crazy uncle in the attic, I think he was talking about Cheney.
There's no downside to going after him, and the Democrats are only going to rally their base. And the base, you know, I think at this point a little disgruntled when it comes to health care and maybe some other issues. But this is one that we absolutely cannot let slip away. What would you say to Dick Cheney to his face if you had the chance? Because he doesn't present himself to anybody that speaks the truth.
You know, honestly, I think he's just trying to prime his book tour, his upcoming book tour. He got $2 million to write about his memories, and he's trying to stay in the public eye in order to push sales for his book. That's what I think. I'm wondering, though, who's doing the introduction to his book. Is it Mephistopheles? I don't know. Maybe it's Satan.
Congressman, are you ready to be attacked by the Republicans in 2010? What kind of re-election run is it?
I am attacked by them all the time, but as Franklin Roosevelt said, I welcome their hatred.
Congressman Alan Grayson, great to have you with us tonight.
We are at war, Dick Cheney came down last week from Mount Megalomania to announce. And when President Obama pretends we aren't, it makes us less safe. If Mr. Cheney believes we are at war, then he, as the most recent former occupant of the vice presidency, is under the strictest of obligations to put aside his case of terminal partisanship and rally to the support of his president at a time of war. Instead, his remarks not only give encouragement to the enemies of this country, they give them an exact measure as to how successful they have been in damaging our freedoms. In a previous time, Mr. Cheney's pathetic exploitation of human fears, his undermining of our courage and resolve and clear-headed, calm thinking would have resulted in his being chased off the national stage by a public sick to death of the personal industry he has made of undermining American freedom and of undermining the authority of this elected government. And in a previous, more resolute time among journalists in this country, nobody would be pretending that this obvious fact was not true. It would have been in every newspaper and on every broadcast. After his disgraceful performance since Christmas, when terrorists attempt attacks in this country, Dick Cheney is the beneficiary. And if he cannot summon exactly the same kind of absolute apolitical patriotism he demanded of everyone else while he was in office, he is, by his own terms, nothing more or less, morally if not legally, than a traitor to the United States of America.